There are matches where the rankings tell you exactly who is going to win before a single ball is struck. And then there are matches where the rankings stop meaning anything at all, where the seedings become just numbers on a page, and what actually happens on the court tells a completely different story. This was one of those nights, because standing on the opposite side of the net from Alex Eala was not just another opponent. It was Elina Svitolina, a top 10 player, a veteran of the biggest stages in the sport, a competitor with every single reason to believe that this quarterfinal on this night belonged to her. But there was a problem. Alex Eala had already beaten her once, and that changes everything. This wasn't just another quarterfinal, this was a rematch, a grudge match, in every sense that matters in professional tennis. The last time these two players crossed paths in Berlin, Eala had already delivered the shock. Now, with a semi-final spot on the line, Svitolina finally had her chance to settle the score, to prove that the first result was the exception and not the beginning of something bigger. The expectations were obvious. The experience sat firmly on Svitolina's side of the net. The ranking sat firmly on Svitolina's side of the net. But the pressure? The pressure was about to land somewhere nobody expected. Because Alex Eala didn't walk onto that court trying to prove she belonged there. She had already proven that. She walked out believing she could win. And the moment the first rallies began, that difference became impossible to ignore. Svitolina came out exactly the way you'd expect from a top 10 player with something to prove. Aggressive, sharp, her serve carrying real pace, her ground strokes landing heavy and deep. She wanted to dictate from the very first point, to deny Eala any chance to settle into the long, patient exchanges that she thrives in. But Eala had a different plan entirely. She wasn't trying to overpower Svitolina. She was trying to move her. Left, right, deep, short cross court. Again and again. The objective was simple, almost brutally so, make Svitolina hit one more difficult shot than she wanted to. One more shot than she was comfortable with. Just one more. And that strategy started working almost immediately. Eala's returns kept coming back with intention. Not just survival shots, not just getting the ball over the net and hoping for the best. Every single one was searching for the next opening. And every time Svitolina shifted her weight toward one side of the court, the next ball from Eala's racket was already heading somewhere else. Suddenly, the favorite was running. And once Svitolina found herself locked into longer rallies, the entire match began drifting into Eala's territory. This is exactly where Alex becomes dangerous. She doesn't need every point to end quickly. In fact, the longer a rally stretches, the more comfortable she seems to get. Svitolina could hit harder, but Eala would simply make her hit harder again and again until the pressure itself created the mistake. That pattern kept repeating through the opening set. A sharp Eala return, a change of direction, a deep, heavy ball, another change of direction, and finally an unforced error from Svitolina. You could feel it shifting in the crowd. This was no longer the plucky underdog just trying to hang around against a top 10 name. Alex Eala was starting to control the rhythm of the entire match. And then came the moment that changed the mood of the set completely. Svitolina built a commanding position in one of the games and looked ready to pull away for good. For most players, that's the moment you tighten up and play it safe. Eala did the exact opposite. She stayed aggressive. She trusted her serve, she trusted her placement, and suddenly, points started slipping away from Svitolina's grip. One, then another, then another. The comeback was happening in real time, right in front of everyone watching, and Svitolina knew it. You could feel the frustration building with every passing rally, because when your opponent refuses to give you a single clean, easy point, every missed shot starts to weigh heavier than the last. That's exactly what Eala wanted. She wasn't just trying to win rallies anymore. She was making Svitolina question where the next ball was going to land. And that uncertainty became the foundation for the entire first set breakthrough. The rallies stretched longer, the placement got sharper, and Svitolina began making exactly the kind of errors Eala had been patiently waiting for. The first set was slipping away, and the player who walked in as the overwhelming favorite was suddenly the one fighting just to survive. Eala closed out the opening set with something even more valuable than the scoreline: belief She had just shown a top 10 opponent that she could absorb the power, ride out the pressure, and still dictate the terms of the point. But here's the thing about tennis: one set means nothing if you can't finish the job. And the real test was still coming. Because Svitolina wasn't going anywhere. She had another set to rewrite the story, and she came out determined to do exactly that. The second set opened up completely differently. Svitolina looked sharper, more urgent, more decisive on her first shots. And for the first time all match, it was Eala who looked like she was being pushed onto the back foot. The scoreboard reflected it instantly. Svitolina built an early advantage. And suddenly, the question hanging over the match wasn't whether Eala could beat a top 10 player anymore. The question was whether she could actually finish what she'd started. This is exactly where young players tend to crack. They play the match of their lives for one set, taste the upset, and then the sheer weight of actually closing it out becomes too much to carry. But Eala didn't panic. She adjusted. Instead of trying to match Svitolina's power shot for shot, she went straight back to what had already worked. Placement, patience, movement, and the most dangerous weapon in her arsenal, the return. Svitolina could serve as hard as she wanted. Eala kept getting the ball back anyway, and every clean return forced Svitolina to hit another shot she didn't necessarily want to hit. That second shot became another opportunity, then another, and slowly, painfully for Svitolina, Eala began clawing her way back into the set. One game, then another. The momentum was shifting again. But this is exactly where the match turned dangerous. Because Svitolina wasn't finished, not even close. She answered with another strong stretch of her own, attacking the open court with real intent. For a moment, it looked like she had finally cracked the code. Push Eala backward, take away her time, finish the points early before she can settle in. And for a while, it worked. But there was one problem. Eala had already figured out exactly what Svitolina was trying to do. So instead of trying to stop every single attack head-on, she started redirecting them. Svitolina would attack one side of the court. Eala would absorb the shot. And then, without warning, the next ball would go the completely opposite direction. Cross-court, right on the line, deep into open space. Svitolina would turn, chase, reach, but by the time she got there, Eala was already set for the next exchange. That's what made this performance so genuinely impressive. Eala wasn't winning because Svitolina was playing poorly. She was engineering situations where Svitolina was far more likely to make a mistake. And that distinction matters more than people realize. Against an experienced, dangerous opponent, you don't always need the winning shot. Sometimes all you need is to make them hit the uncomfortable one. And Eala kept doing exactly that. Point after point after point. Then came another pivotal game. Svitolina had the chance to stretch her advantage even further. The pressure was enormous. Eala answered with a combination of sharp serving and even sharper returns. Suddenly, the game was level again. And then came the rallies. Long, grinding rallies. The kind that seemed to stretch on forever. One side, then the other. Back again. Again. And eventually, Svitolina blinked. An error. Then another. Eala didn't celebrate like the match was already won. She knew better than that. But the momentum had returned to her side, and now it was Svitolina doing the chasing. The score tightened. The tension in the arena climbed with every single point, as if each one alone could decide the entire match. Then, Eala produced another sharp serve. Svitolina got her racket on it but couldn't control the return. Another point. Another swing in Eala's favor. And suddenly, she was just one game away from putting this entire match firmly in her own hands. Svitolina fought back, of course she did. This was a top 10 player. She wasn't going to hand over a semi-final place without a real fight. She attacked. She defended. She tried desperately to shorten the rallies, to force Eala into uncomfortable, rushed positions. But Eala kept finding answers every single time. And then came the moment that could have flipped the whole match on its head. Svitolina had one more opportunity to level the pressure. Instead, the rally stretched on and on. Eala stayed patient. She waited. She moved Svitolina from one corner to the other. And when the opening finally appeared, she took it without hesitation. The shot landed clean. Svitolina couldn't get there. The crowd erupted. And Eala knew exactly what that point meant. She was now standing on the edge of victory. One more game. One more push. One more moment of composure standing between her and the semi-final. But Svitolina was still there, still fighting. And what happened next turned the closing stretch into pure, unfiltered drama. The final games had absolutely everything. Pressure, long, physical rallies, momentum swinging back and forth, and that unmistakable feeling that a single mistake could decide the entire outcome. Svitolina refused to surrender. She started attacking with real urgency. Every ball carried more purpose. Every serve carried more weight, because she knew exactly what was happening. Eala was one step away from finishing it, and if she couldn't stop the bleeding right now, this rematch would end exactly like the first one did. With Alex Eala's hand raised, the next exchange became a pure battle of patience. Svitolina tried to force the pace. Eala absorbed it. Svitolina changed direction. Eala responded instantly. The rally kept going. And then, another error. The pressure was becoming visible now, written all over Svitolina's body language. But Eala still had work left to do, because the closer you get to victory, the more dangerous a match can suddenly become. A player starts thinking about the finish line instead of the next ball. One loose point can plant doubt where there wasn't any before. Eala refused to let that happen. She stayed locked on the next ball, not the semi-final, not the upset, not the ranking sitting across the net from her, just the next ball. And that mentality became the difference maker. Svitolina attacked again. Eala returned. Another rally began, and this one stretched even longer than the last. The crowd held its breath. 1 shot, 2, 3, 4, 5. Neither player willing to give an inch. Svitolina finally tried to change direction. Eala had already read it. She moved into position, and instead of playing it safe, she redirected the ball straight into open space. Svitolina chased. She reached, but she couldn't get there in time. Another massive point for Eala. Now the pressure was unbearable. Svitolina needed an answer immediately. Eala just needed composure. Then came the serve. A sharp, precise delivery. A strong return in response. Another exchange. Svitolina tried to go on the attack, but the shot went wrong. An unforced error. And Eala was there again, one single point away from finishing the job. This was it. The moment where every earlier rally, every sprint across the baseline, every ounce of patience, every ounce of pressure absorbed finally came together. Svitolina served. Eala returned. The rally started. Svitolina moved her wide. Eala recovered. Svitolina attacked again. Eala stayed locked in the point. Then Eala changed direction. The ball flew across the court. Svitolina tried to respond, but the pressure had finally become too much. The error came, and just like that, it was over. Alex Eala had done it again. She had beaten Elina Svitolina, a top 10 opponent, a heavily seeded player, someone who walked in with every possible advantage on paper. And yet, when the biggest points of the match arrived, it was Eala who was still standing. This wasn't just another win. It was a statement, because beating a great player once can be dismissed as an upset. Doing it again? That tells an entirely different story. It says the first win was never luck. It says the first result was never a fluke. It says the elite players of this sport are beginning to run into something they can't easily solve. Her patience, her movement, her court awareness, her uncanny ability to turn defense into attack in a single shot. And maybe most importantly of all, her refusal to panic the moment a match gets uncomfortable. Svitolina had the power. She had the experience. She had the rankings sitting comfortably in her favor. But Eala had something else entirely. She had the answer. And now, the semi-final awaits. The road doesn't get any easier from here. The pressure doesn't disappear. If anything, it only grows heavier, because after a performance like this, everyone starts paying attention. Everyone starts asking just how far this young Filipino star can actually go. But one thing is already undeniable. Alex Eala is no longer knocking on the door of the world's best players. She is walking straight through it. And if this performance proved anything at all, it's this. The next time a top 10 player looks across the net and sees Alex Eala standing there, they won't be wondering who she is. They'll be wondering how to stop her.